You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
Hey everybody, hope you're all back to work, successful, and looking forward to that January paycheck. Hey, we got a great topic today, comp plans. What makes up a great comp plan? I used to call myself a comp planologist because I studied them so well, because what I wanted to do was make the most amount of money. And, that sounds greedy and selfish, but we're in sales to make money. If you're not money motivated, sales is not going to be the right place for you. There's services, there's marketing, there's plenty of other things to do you'd be much happier at if you're not money motivated. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably are by now. And the way to make more money is to sell more. And what you want to do is optimize the comp plan for what you are good at. So I got Chad back on the line today. We're going to discuss it. We're also going to be talking about the trends that are going on in our industry today. Quotas are too high. What everyone's trying to do is save on sales expense. So they make the quota high so they can have a high on-target income. But it's kind of backfiring because I think most people are motivated when you're over quota. I remember the times when I was over quota, you're fired up. When you work for yourself, it's really like when you got your nut covered, when you got all your expenses covered, then you're kind of over quota because that's all money you can reinvest in the business and help grow the business so it can compound and make more. So, and we're going to talk about what makes a comp plan both effective and simple and easy to understand, and what are the downsides of bad comp plans, and how do they affect us? Because today, I think we're thinking that we're just going to take the comp plan that we have and move on. Yeah, you can do that, but I've always negotiated my comp plan. I've always thought through it, and now's the time to do it because management is thinking through territories, quotas, compensation, and if you don't get your little interest planted in their head, it's not going to happen. Also, I want to make sure you're checking out the blogs of my partners. Prezi, great blog, great PowerPoint presentation, Prezi presentations for your kickoff meeting, where you can really wow your management team and wow your customers with a story of the journey that they're going to go on. So much better than PowerPoint. I put my whole course into Prezi. It's amazing. The feedback already is really good. It's been out for 2 days. So if you want to check that out, I put that in the show notes. The price is going to double in the next month. So if you're going to do it now. If you have questions, you either know me or you don't know me. And what I did, the math, basically, it costs people $700 to get a net new cold outreach meeting. And that's just the math. If you take somebody who's making $80K a year, they get maybe 100. I doubt it. Probably like less than half of them are really qualified. So for 1/3 the price of that, you can learn something that's 10 times more effective and automated. I get 5 to 10 net new meetings a week without any human intervention. I automate the whole thing. It looks beautiful. People love it. No one thinks it's spam. Everyone likes the process. So check that out. It's in the show notes. Get the meeting. That's the program. Let's get in the interview and wait to the end. I'll sum it all up and make sure you're checking out the show notes for all the links to everything. Hey, Chad, let's talk about comp plans. It's that time of year, isn't it?
Everybody's getting ready to figure out what next year is going to look like.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you've had a lot of experience with comp plans. What's the most important thing for you?
Well, so if I'm looking at it for myself, one of the first things that I look at, and one of the things I always try to do for my teams, is make sure that it's stable. Right, I've worked for a lot of organizations where every quarter, based on performance, they want to tweak the comp plan, they want to change something, and all that does is create distraction. Right, so I think it's really important for executives, sales executives especially, to make sure that they're actually taking the time to think through the comp plan, make sure they understand what their goals are. They have to be able to articulate that clearly to the sales team, and then structure the comp plan in such a way that it's going to stay stable for 12 months. Give people time to work inside of whatever that structure is and quit changing the rules. As an individual contributor, that always irritated the crap out of me.
Yeah, and I think it's gotten more and more complex. Certainly once you start doing the division of labor and, we're now moving to smaller upfront deals with, monthly recurring. And, I remember when I got started, it was pretty simple. You had a base and you had a commission rate. And I'm listening to all kinds of people because there was a report that came out that only 53% of the sales reps make quota.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of interpretations of that. Because most people are like, oh, well, that's because they're not good salespeople. That's one interpretation. Right?
Yeah. That's executives' favorite interpretation, it seems like.
And I've also noticed that there's kind of almost 3 or 4 numbers. There's the board number, what the board is being told that they'll do and that they'll build expenses off of, an investment off of. And then there's the executive number, which the executives will get comped off of. And then there's the rep number, and each time there's a little bit of a padding added to it.
There's definitely a padding effect. What's interesting to me, and I've always, I don't know that I've necessarily run into it, although I've seen it a lot, is that as you translate those numbers down from the board to the exec to the rep, it's amazing the fuzziness, right, that starts to happen. Like, it seems to me, and I guess this goes back to that whole point of stable, is like if a sales exec knows what he has to deliver and that you then have to divide it up across your team, you've got to make sure that all the math works. And I've seen some comp plans where, because like any good sales guy, I'm going to try and figure out how to game the system, right? It's just the way I'm out to make as much money as possible. So I need to know what the rules of engagement are. But then when you just take a step back and you add it all back up, you still can at times see it not achieving or exceeding exec or board numbers. And that, I think, it lends itself to confusion, and it lends itself to comp plans that are not extremely clear.
Yeah, and my number one is that the quota is real, meaning that somebody actually put some thought into it.
Yeah, just didn't pull it out of the air.
And I had one manager, he goes, no, everyone gets the same quota. And I'm like, does everybody have the same territory? Does everybody have the same support? Does everybody have the same, account base? And he goes, well, it's too confusing if it's different quotas. It's like, it's math. It's not that confusing.
And it's not even complex math. I mean, we're making it more complex because, like you said, division of labor, right? So you'll have SDRs or BDRs, sales development reps, whatever they're calling them, that may be setting appointments, and they're probably comped differently than your key account reps or your strategic account reps, whatever they're being called. And then what ends up happening when you get into that division of labor and the comp plans are different for each one, as they should be, then you start to see a lot of friction between, well, what's the handoff? Well, I qualified it as an SDR. It's not my fault that the key account manager couldn't do anything with it. Well, all right. Now you're creating a situation where, without clear rules of engagement and a stable structure, or something that is achievable for each of those roles, it's going to create drag. It's going to create drag on the sales organization and drag on each of the reps. And it probably could have some blowback culturally as well.
Yeah, because, a smart rep will say, like, well, I need, another BDR, SDR, insight person, whatever you call it. And they're not thinking that if you do that, that raises the cost of sale. So that means your quota is going up. And I'm shocked how many reps I talk to who do not understand comp plans. I got into it on LinkedIn this week, and he goes, oh, if it doesn't close in December, it just closes in January and everything's fine. I go, yeah, except for you don't get paid for it. and he goes, yeah, I do. I go, no, you don't. Your manager's going to add it to your quota because it's a sure thing.
Right.
So all of a sudden, and people can't understand simple division. And that's why at the end of the beginning of Q4, I do several podcasts on, please listen to me on this. This is how the game is played, right. Because what do reps do? They blow up their forecast, and all of a sudden they go into Q1, and the manager gives them this huge quota, and they go, I can't do that. Why is it in the CRM then?
Well, and it's amazing. I think the other thing for me, when you look at a comp plan, is making sure that your systems or your forecasting process supports it, right? Enables it, mirrors it, not works against it. Because if there's not a consistent, if language that's used in the comp plan is not the same language that's used in forecasting or the way you qualify. There's a mismatch there. And so you end up spending a lot of time debating this account versus that account rather than having something really clear, right? So I think the comp plan has to not be, a set aside from what the sales team does. It needs to be a part of that DNA, a pillar of the way they act, and it needs to provide that foundational support across the entire sales organization and, quite frankly, even beyond the sales organization.
Yeah, I mean, because today, if you can't put your comp plan in a spreadsheet, and, basically, type in your deals for that quarter and figure out how much you're getting paid. Because it used to be super simple. And it used to be people wouldn't even go the difference between 5 and 10%. No one would do 6 or 9. It was like, because they had to do it in their head. It's like they didn't want to have to use a spreadsheet. But today it's turning into a neural network and an AI app to figure out how to pay people.
Well, and I've seen, this is, at least for me and reps that I had work for me, you'd always see them. If the first thing you would do, you give them the comp plan, you go over it, you explain why the comp plan is structured the way it is, and you show them the tools that, maybe it somehow ties into your CRM and this is how it's going to be calculated. But myself and a lot of the reps that worked for me, the first thing we did was crack open Excel and figure out, okay, here's my tracking. Like, I understand that the company may have, ways that they're going to track it, but I'm not 100% sure I trust it. And then, quite frankly, in Excel, I can then determine where I need to put, my focus. Am I getting higher comp on net new business? Or is it higher comp because the company wants us to expand existing accounts? Or is it penetration into a new industry or vertical? And so how do I work those numbers backwards? And I see a lot of reps that don't take the time to understand, not only the comp plan, but what that means when they work backwards into their activity and focus levels. So a comp plan that somehow, I don't want to say is too simple, because I think we've made it more complex than it needs to be, but one that easily allows reps to back into an activity and a focus level, I think is critical as well.
And that's it. And I think a lot of times there's a mismatch, certainly like on the quarterly goals of the manager, who's probably comped on meeting quarterly goals, but the reps aren't. So, they're putting the pressure on the rep to close it by the end of the quarter, and the rep goes, well, it doesn't matter to me if it comes in the next day.
Yeah.
Love to help you out, buddy, but it's your priority, not mine.
Well, an exec comp it's always interesting. There's always, not always, don't want to use absolutes, but often you see the way exec comp is structured doesn't connect to the way they've broken down sales comp or even marketing comp if they're getting variable comp for MQLs or quality of MQLs. There's this mismatch, right? So that consistency of that compensation plan and how it ties into what the business issues and objectives are for the execs and the board and the organization as a whole, it doesn't happen as often as I think it should. I think a lot of sales executives or executives in general do themselves a disservice by not spending the time to do that. And then what happens is the reps will try and just, okay, I'm going to focus on my little area, and it's not my problem if the exec screwed up the comp plan and it doesn't really achieve what they need it to achieve. And I think that gets dangerous, right? It gets dangerous because it's a mismatch in motivation.
Yeah, it is. And, because this is the time of year that, certainly, I think most companies get them out in January. I've been at companies where you didn't get it to the middle of February. Look. And there's so much anxiety because everyone's jockeying. The managers, they don't want to tell you anything because they want to, reassign territories. Reps have to hold their cards close to their vest about the deals that are happening in Q1. How have you positioned yourself to, make sure that comp plan is, advantageous to you and doesn't get, overblown or undoable?
Well, I learned, I guess, the hard way, right? To be extremely honest with myself and with any of the executives that I was dealing with as an individual contributor or with reps that were part of the teams that I ran. Like, I always wanted I wanted to know, whether I was an individual contributor or not, I wanted to know what was the goal for our business. So essentially reverse engineering the way we sold and using it on ourselves. So eating our own dog food. What is it we're trying to accomplish? What are the metrics? What are the KPIs? And then, okay, how does that kind of work its way down into the organization? I can work accounts any way you want me to. I'm going to focus on how I'm going to make the most money, because that's why I got into sales. I mean, no, not to hurt anybody's feelings out there. I'm not in sales to create world peace. I want to solve problems for businesses and I want to make money. That's what I'm here to do. But I also want to do it. I am aware there's a cultural component to a sales rep's performance inside of an organization. Well, in order to try and get over that, sales is the devil mentality that you see a lot of times, there needs to be an awareness, a bigger awareness of what's going on inside of the company. So for me, it was always not just looking at my comp plan or making it sound like I was just looking at it for myself, but I wanted to make sure that I was being, quote unquote, a good corporate citizen, as well as making sure that it was stable and fair and accessible and going to help us all hit our goals. Because there's nothing worse than when the goals that are set up or the KPIs that are structured, they're skewed, they're screwed up. Something happens in the market, maybe it had political changes, who knows what it is. But when those are off and the numbers aren't being hit and the revenue's not coming in, then all of a sudden the attention all the way down into the minutia of how many phone calls did I make, how many emails did I send, how many face-to-face meetings, that was the last place in the world I ever wanted to be. And so you want me to go do this? Then help me make sure that I am educated and aware and aligned with everything else that's going on. So it was that kind of perspective of, yeah, it's about me, but I understand I'm not playing alone here.
And I'm seeing a huge trend. And tell me if you're seeing it. Of, people moving to 6-month comp plans. Have you seen that?
Man, I've seen that, and I guess I guess I could see where it would make sense if it's the first tip of the spear deal is transactional short sales cycle. Now, most of my life, I'm used to B2B complex, 9, 12, 18, hell, in some cases, 24-month sales cycles for very large deals. So if you change it every 6 months, then that's going to change my account strategy every 6 months. And that I don't see making a lot of sense. But as we're moving to more of that, SDR, division of labor type stuff, smaller, get in the door types of accounts, I could see it potentially making sense, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just too old. Maybe I just don't move as fast as I used to. 6 months to me goes by in the blink of an eye. I mean, hell, a year goes by in the blink of an eye now.
Yeah, it does. I mean, IBM, when I was there through an acquisition, they moved to it. And, it was just clearly a red flag that it was a commission expense management thing as opposed to, a strategic thing. Because, if they had visibility into a huge deal, they could move things around. And, in a company like that, a bluebird can be a big bluebird.
Right.
And I've also seen it in smaller companies. And typically when I go in, I ask, what's the percentage of the reps making quota? And it's just shockingly low today. And then did the company make its number? They go, oh, yeah. And I go, how's that possible?
Wait. So the company hit it, but less than half of your sales reps hit their target. So we're back to the 80-20 rule, right? 20% of your reps are generating 80% of your income.
That's one interpretation.
And it gets the thing that if somebody came to me and said, hey, I'm going to move us to a 6-month comp plan, my first question would be why? What is it we're trying to do? Do you really just want to manage commission expense? Because the other thing that I look for in comp plans and I think is important in comp plans, depending on the length of the sales cycle, is whether or not, like if you start working a deal, let's say middle of the year, and you're working it and you've chosen to focus on that account because based on your comp plan that as it stands today, you're going to achieve X. And then all of a sudden, halfway through the game, the rules change and they come back and say, oh, well, we're going to change the comp plan, or it's a new comp plan this year. And that X you thought you were going to get, you're really only going to see about a third of that. And that is soul crushing when you've put the effort into a complex sale thinking that if you can get this pulled off, there's going to be the return. Well, hell, if I know my comp plan was going to be that, I would have totally done things differently. And so I think with 6-month plans I think you run the risk of keeping your salespeople from being able to focus the way you want them to drive the results you're after.
Yeah, I agree with you there. My point about the 50% was that they over-assigned quota by 40%. Meaning that, say the company wanted to do 10 million, they assigned 14 million of quota.
Yeah.
Which is not uncommon today. And I go, why'd you do that? Oh, we wanted to make sure we were okay. And I go a level below that and I go, so you feel that people will sell more when they're under quota or over quota? And well, I guess over quota. So why would you make quota so hard to get then?
Right. Well, and you see that when you see that over assignment of quota, sometimes it's deliberate.
Oh, it's always deliberate. Yeah,
and I've seen it actually be accidental. I caught I won't name the company I was working for, but I caught one of the divisions I was working for. This is going back, I don't know, 10, 11 years. I just did the math. On just the team that I was a part of. There were other elements in the sales organization, and just working backwards, they had almost overassigned 24% more in quota, and then in the same breath would complain that their turnover costs on the sales team, because if you lose them, then you got to bring people in and ramp up costs, time and money. They'd complain about that, but they didn't see the connection there, right? So it's that one of the things for comp plans for me is always, again, making sure that it's not looked at in a silo, but you got to understand there are impacts across the organization. Culturally, you could take hits on cost of sales or, headcount or overhead, things like that. And I think most executives have a tendency to look at it in a silo, right? In this protected little perfect lab environment.
Yes.
Lab environments not paying my bills.
Right. And I think people have to manage it like a sports franchise team
Yes.
versus, an assembly line. Right? Because, okay, it might take, a month to learn how to put a door on a car, but it's going to take probably 18 months to learn how to sell the product into a large enterprise account.
Oh, without a doubt.
Right. So you have, you get the right pitcher, the right catcher, the right left fieldman, and all of a sudden you start, not all those players on that team get paid the same. Right.
Well, and that's another thing, right? So you start. Have you seen organizations where they've made the comp plan so different based on division of labor that it actually creates internal strife in the sales teams themselves? Have you run into that?
Not so much. What I've run into most of the time is like when there's somebody who knocks it out of the park consistently, they keep coming up with new and new handicaps. And what they do is they force the person out the door. Now, if you use that on a sports team, let's say you have, a home run hitter. Okay, well, we can't pay him more than the right fielder.
Right.
Right. No one, that logic just doesn't apply, right?
Yeah, and sometimes I can't understand why people choose to look at it that way. I mean, have you seen impacts as a result of that?
Oh yeah. They leave. Of course they do.
Right? I'm out.
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I look at the comp plan and they go, oh yeah, there's 2 people in that territory. You have your choice of either keeping these accounts that you built with this huge number or taking this brand new territory with this lower number, but there's no revenue and starting over. And you got to give that account to that guy you hate over there. And could you spend 3 months teaching them what to do? And you're like, no, thanks.
Yeah, no, I'll pass.
Yeah.
That's the other thing about comp plans that has always made me kind of tilt my head like a confused puppy. So, the organizations we probably all do business with them or have talked to the sales rep, where every 12 months you're going to get a new list of accounts, or you're going to have to give up. They're going to reshuffle it, right? And Apple was one of these. When I was working with some of their reps, I never worked for Apple, but working with their reps, if you would get into October, November, they'd be like, yeah, we don't want to talk about those accounts anymore because that's probably not going to be my account at the first of the year. okay, so well, what in essence just happened is you just lost 3 months of work on these accounts that could have produced revenue, could have produced return, because you've created a culture where the shuffle is going to be so great at the first of the year or at the end of the financial calendar that people start to then make deliberate choices about where they're going to spend their time. And that has a drastic impact on the amount of revenue they produce. And so that consistent shuffle of whether it be accounts or, I love the realignment of territories. Like, last year Texas was part of my territory. Now I'm going to Michigan. Like what? Why would I have never understood why organizations would consistently make such drastic changes. Occasionally, yes, but consistently, I can see that being a severe drag again on the teams and the efforts. And I think probably goes back to that whole stable point.
Yeah, and I think what I've always talked to when I was a manager, I would tell reps, I go, this is your A territory. This I can guarantee you're going to get next year if I have any control over it. Now, your B territory, I understand is going to be B, and that meaning it's going to be a lower priority, but I want you to work it and tell me if there's something that's just not going to happen this year, and you can just tell me. I'll manage it, and I understand completely. But I'll protect you, but you got to protect me. So you got to, I think, manage like you're managing, a sporting team, and understand that you want these players. You put all this investment in them, and that came out of your back, and you don't want them leaving. Because I heard a manager say, well, we don't hire A players, we rent them because they don't stay.
Oh, I've never heard that before. That's great.
Right.
And true. Often true.
Yeah, because it's too hard to, convince the CFO that this person's really worth more than the other person. And I think we're going dangerously in this direction of hiring. I like the SDR role and even having, young junior people come in. But, I think once you get the accountants involved in it, because they see everybody as equal, it's a spreadsheet view of the world. And then they're going to go into the division of labor gone mad, which works in a high velocity sale where there's pull, but not many companies have pull.
Right.
And if you're still in the push stage, that's a talent. That's a skill. That does not come, they don't teach it in college, and it takes a while to develop, and it is a skill. And once you built that skill, you don't want it walking out the door.
Well, the maintaining of your team over time will generate better results, right? I mean, it's one of the reasons why one of the best tools I've seen in comp plans is a team accelerator. So yes, everybody may have different comp plans because the players, like you said, with the sports now, with the baseball analogy, they do different things. So there might be, different types of comp plans for them. However, much like a baseball team or a football team, when you win the championship, everybody gets a really expensive ring and a nice bonus, right? Yeah. So in order to get over that, I in the past have used, and I didn't come up with it, stole it from somebody else, but that team incentive, that team accelerator, that if, for the quarter or the half or the year, whatever it is, if the entire team achieves the targets, then there's a way to accelerate their individual comp. Now, it usually is a multiplier on whatever their comp plan is, just to keep it, fair across the board. But that type of layering, that one layer of like, okay, you hit these, if the entire team hits these targets and everybody makes more money, you see people work together more often and have a tendency to stick around a little bit longer because they don't feel like they're just hanging out by themselves.
And that brings up a great point, because most sales managers think of their team as a team. Right. And in some ways they are to him, the manager, but to the rep, it's almost the opposite, because if one person is, 150% of the quota, all the rest of them have to push that person down. Otherwise they look bad.
Right.
And I remember this one startup, we'd all meet at the airport, or be going back to the airport. We get on the rental bus and head back to the airport, and we'd all look around and say, okay, who's not going to be on this bus trip next quarter? And it's sad, but there's a lot of backbiting And I think that a team bonus would kind of pull people together, because managers tend to think, oh, they're my team, but there's no incentive to them helping each other. It's a de-incentive, especially
Right.
if they like share resources.
Well, and yeah, that's where I was just going to go, especially today when you see it, how many people are involved in a sale. I mean, we often talk about how many people are involved on the buyer side. And I forget what the latest 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. There's a lot of people typically on the buying side of it. But we're also seeing an increase in the number of people on the sales side of it. The days of the lone wolf, it still happens. I still know some that can pull it off, but that requires a command of a skill set that you don't see a lot of people working to develop, as much anymore. You see a lot more specialization. And so now you've got more people involved in the sales process. Well, you want everybody working together. The only way to do that, if you're going to have different comp plans for the different players, is to give them some type of team incentive.
Hey, me and Chad are going to do a part 2 on that, as far as how to negotiate your comp plan. Now, that's kind of a controversial topic, but it certainly is possible, and it's certainly something that I've been able to do in most cases, not every case, but you can typically get something. But comp plans are a hot topic, and this is a very emotional time of the year, meaning that a lot of people get all wrapped up on their quotas and their territory. We get attached to things. And what ends up happening is the Q1 kind of get wrapped around the axle on these topics, and it always seems to work out pretty well by Q2. So I think that the key decision is this the place I want to be? And if it is, buckle down, stay focused, work your way through it. If it isn't, it's the lowest unemployment in 20 years. There's plenty of stuff out there, but you got to have the game. You got to have the skills. And this is why you come to the podcast. And getting new meetings is the number one skill that everybody wants. And I can teach you how to do it. I know you can save your money. I'll learn it myself, Brian. I know everything. I know I'm only making 100K. If you're not making 500K, you need this course. That's all I have to say to you. So you can save your money if you want. It's your money, and slug it through, getting hung up on and unsubscribed and no one responding to you. Or you could do it the smart way. Up to you. Hey, make sure you're checking out the show notes for all the partnerships of the podcast. Just check out their blogs. Next week, I'm dropping an episode, a great interview, one of the best interviews I had all of last year. I saved it for January. They're going to be talking about how they're using social intelligence to start conversations and get meetings into cold accounts. Sound familiar? But this one's free. It's the podcast, baby. And we just happened to hit on the right topic. And guess what they're using? Nudge.ai. If you're not using that, you're crazy. Okay, that's it. Enough of me. Let's get back to work. Negotiate your comp plan, will you?